This slideshow focuses in on Chapter 4, the statistical research process. So our objective this week is to start becoming aware of when articles or arguments contain research, especially statistics. So instead of just kind of reading through it without thinking, again, critical readers always question the validity of the research or the statistics that is being presented in the article. Is it valid? Where did the author get this information? And so this slideshow is going to focus on how the research is completed and what you should question as you're reading. So all of this information can be found in your textbook on pages 53 through 56, and you're going to want to familiarize yourself with those textbook pages as it's going to give you a lot of information, much more than what this slideshow is going to give you. So as I always say, combining my information with the textbook is the very best way of learning, especially in an online format. So again, as you're reading arguments or articles, if you see, polling numbers or surveys that were done or research studies that were done, it's very important for your brain to notice when you see this type of inductive reasoning and ask yourself, how valid is this information? Is this information valid? Um, who did this research? For example, where did they get these numbers? What institution provided this? Can this be believed? Does the author even understand the study that was done? The problem that's happening in many articles that we read is that authors will read portions of studies or they'll take excerpts of studies and they'll put it into their own piece. Of course, they cite the information, so it isn't plagiarism, but they themselves may not even fully understand what it is that they are presenting. So it makes it difficult for us as critical thinkers to determine what is and isn't valid. But the best way we can combat that is to always keeping our minds open as we're reading and stopping ourselves and thinking, is this valid information? Is this information that I can look up even? So if they provide an institution where the research was done, can I look that up? Can I verify whether or not it is valid? So the next few slides are going to focus on what makes a good statistical research study. And I want to be very clear that this slideshow is discussing statistical research studies, meaning studies that are polls or surveys where you're going to get statistical data. These are different from controlled research studies, which is actually our next chapter. So how is statistical research completed? So first thing, you have to ask yourself 3 important questions when you're beginning a statistical research study. What are you wanting to find out? Who do you want to know about? And who can you study to get accurate answers about your population that you're interested in? So the first thing you would ask is, what do I want to find out? This is called the characteristic of interest. Who do I want to know about? This would be your target population, the population of people that you will be surveying or polling. And who are you going to study to get accurate answers about this population? That would be considered your sample size. We're going to spend a little bit of time discussing the sample because it's one of the most important portions of statistical research. For statistical research to be valid, you really need to have the correct size and scope of a sample. So you have to have enough people for this to be something that could be applied to everyone. You have to make sure the people you choose for your study represents the target audience and represents what it is that you're trying to accomplish. It also needs to be random and um, make sure that you are including everybody so that you can get a clearer picture of the swath of people that you are trying to study. So, again, if the sample is not large enough, the study may not be as valid. Now, there are a lot of numbers that they will give you when discussing sample size. I have read that if the sample is not at least 70, if you have not surveyed or polled at least 70 people, it is completely invalid. And on the other end, they say for a study to be, you know, valid, you need to have at least 1,000 people that you have surveyed or polled, or that you are, researching. So you have two pretty differences in numbers, but kind of keep in mind that if you see a study and they say, oh yeah, we had 25 participants, that should automatically be a red flag that it is not as valid as it should be. And if you were creating a study, you would probably want to have at least 1,000, if not more, because the more people, apparently, the more valid it is. So again, what is the sample size is a very important question to ask. Is the sample representative in all significant characteristics and in the proportion to those characteristics? So are you representing everybody that would be in your study that has the characteristic for which you are studying? Have all of the significant characteristics been considered? Meaning, have you vetted the people that you are studying? Have you been careful to ensure that you have all of the characteristics in line? If a study is a poll, so you're surveying or polling people, are the questions biased? Are the questions asked in a way that could skew your results? And then what is the credibility of the polling organization or research institute that is conducting the study? Is it biased? And that's the biggest thing you want to think about. And is the survey biased because of the vested interest of the company that paid for it? There was a really large study done where they were trying to prove that chocolate milk was a fantastic post-workout recovery drink. So they kept touting it was better than Gatorade and on and on. And they had some really great information. But it was funded, the whole entire study was funded by the Dairy Council. So that kind of raised some eyebrows in the fact that maybe this study was a little biased because of the vested interest of the company that paid for it. Okay, so you may have felt that I was a little bit vague as I went through those 6 questions, and I was. That was actually intentional, because your assignment is to erase the vaguity, or don't even think that's a real word, the vagueness of my lecture. You're going to use the textbooks to fill in more information regarding the 6 questions that I just discussed. Um, my descriptions were very brief. I want to keep this video short, so you have to go and do the work and find more information about those questions. So I have given you this assignment here. I'm also duplicating this slide. It will be at the end of this slideshow so that you can pause at the end and look at it again. And you will have to do a little bit of book work to learn more about those 6 questions. I promise it won't be in vain because the assignment after this one is going to require you use that information. So you will get a chance to use the information that you learn from this assignment. But we got to keep watching because I'm not quite done yet. Okay, so once you determine whether or not statistical studies are valid or whether the research institution is valid, The other thing that we have to be aware of as critical thinkers is the way that the information is reported. So we have to be a little skeptical every time we look at headlines or if we're reading a study where there are some statistics. You want to keep in mind that full studies are not usually reported. They're only given little excerpts. Sometimes this can create some distorted pictures or some incomplete pictures of the research for the readers. In truth, advertisers will just downright lie with their statistics. They will skew them in a way that makes them work for what they want to do. So you need to be very skeptical when it comes to advertising in many ways because they are selling something. That is their whole job. Journalists can also kind of change the significance of reporting of statistical studies. They themselves may have some vested interests. Reporters may discuss poll results without giving numbers, and headlines may distort actual findings. These three things at the bottom here are happening pretty frequently right now with our presidential election. And so as you're kind of flipping through the internet and you're seeing these big headlines come up, kind of practice looking at the way the headlines are written to see if bias is within the way that they have printed it. Oftentimes you can usually tell who the news is for or against based on their headlines. The other thing is we have to be careful not to be tricked by statistics. Again, as I said, it's important to always question anytime you see numbers. So for example, if you're a student getting ready to take classes and you saw this headline, if you saw 50% of students hated Mrs. Shaughnessy CRE 101 class, ooh, would you take this class? I mean, that's a pretty negative headline there. Would it skew your thoughts automatically of the class? Well, you might be worried. I probably would be worried. But what if the sample size was only 2? That's not being reported, but what if it was? If only 2 students were polled to get the statistic of 50%. That means one loves it and one hated it. Is this a large enough sample size to really give you the best information? So that's my best example for always questioning the sample size. So I like to use this as sort of the, keep this in your mind as an example. The other part of this example is the headline. It's interesting because I started with the negative version, but what if it would have started with a positive version? If I would have said 50% of students loved Mrs. Shaughnessy CRE class, just having the positive as the first headline you see might skew your brain a little bit more than having the negative. So kind of think about those two things. What is the sample size? And are the headlines written positively or negatively? Or are they written in a way that might, sway you one way or the other? So always think about bias. Well, here is your assignment again. It is a duplicate slide of the one that was in the middle of the slideshow, so you don't have to go through and watch the whole show. You can just click on this and complete the notes portion of those 6 questions. And that's it.